Okay, so imagine this scenario. A student, right? They're looking at a test paper, not zoning out, not giving up, just, well, stuck.
Mm.
They've done the work, they get the basic ideas, but something's blocking them from actually answering. What if that block isn't the knowledge, but the words on the page?
That's a really powerful starting point, isn't it? It gets right to the core issue. We often jump to thinking, oh, they just don't understand the material.
Yeah.
But what if the language is the hurdle they just can't clear? That's exactly what the article we're looking at today digs into.
Precisely. We're doing a deep dive into a Substack piece by Dr. Jaime Hoerricks. It's called When Words Get in the Way, How Plain Language Unlocks Grade-Level Content.
Right title.
It really is. And the key thing here isn't about, dumbing things down. It's about seeing how really clear communication can make complex academic stuff accessible, separating the idea from unnecessarily tricky language.
Right.
So our mission today, to pull out the crucial insights from Dr. Hoerricks' article and figure out how educators can make learning more accessible just by focusing on clarity.
And it's so important
Mm-hmm.
because her article shows just how easily complex language can, maybe unintentionally, stop students from showing what they actually know.
So the article kicks off with this very relatable story, doesn't it? Dr. Hoerricks is proctoring an exam.
Yeah, and sees this kind of detachment everywhere, students just staring.
And it wasn't that the concepts were totally alien to them. It seemed more like they couldn't even get started with the questions because of how they were phrased, like cracking a code.
Exactly, and that's the moment of realization, right? That the test in that instance wasn't really measuring if they understood the subject.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of accidentally testing how well they could navigate really dense academic sentences. So are we testing knowledge or, like, linguistic agility?
And Dr. Hoerricks makes the point, this isn't just about tests. It creeps into everything, textbooks, online platforms.
Yeah, even tools meant to help.
Right. And as kids move up grades, the language just gets thicker, more complex.
Which leads to this assumption, this maybe flawed assumption, that complex language equals academic rigor.
Mm-hmm.
The article mentions Algebra 1 and 2 specifically, where the language about the math concepts gets complicated, but maybe not always because the math itself needs it to be.
That's such a key takeaway. Language is the delivery system, right? Not the standard. It's how we communicate the idea.
Exactly.
And when that delivery system is all convoluted and tricky, it's a barrier. Students are basically being asked to do two jobs, get the concept and decode the complex language just to figure out the task.
Yeah, and for some students, as the article points out, that's just too much. They hit a wall. Complete disengagement.
So this naturally leads to asking, okay, who does this linguistic gatekeeping affect the most? And by that, we mean how this unnecessarily complex language acts like a locked door.
Right, who's disproportionately impacted.
Dr. Hoerricks highlights several groups, but she goes deeper than just listing them, like SLD, AUT, ELL.
Yeah, she really explores the why. So for students with specific learning disabilities, SLDs, their processing might be more nonlinear. It doesn't always mesh with typical sentence structures.
And that can lead to people underestimating how smart they really are.
Totally. And the article floats this really interesting idea that maybe sometimes an SLD label is sort of a placeholder for kids whose learning style just wasn't supported early on.
That's a powerful thought. What about autistic students?
Well, their challenges can vary a lot, right? Language processing differences, executive function struggles, sensory needs, all things that can make accessing learning through dense text really hard.
And sometimes, the article notes, we focus on the observable behaviors and miss those internal complexities.
Exactly. Then you have multilingual learners. It's so easy to underestimate their cognitive abilities just because they're working in a second or third language.
Yeah, difficulty decoding the language gets mistaken for difficulty thinking.
Right. And the common thread here, the really powerful point the article makes, is that all these students are being asked to do complex thinking using tools, delivery systems that weren't designed for them.
And in a busy, fast-paced classroom where the language is often just assumed to be accessible,
They get locked out. Not just struggling, but actually locked out of the learning itself.
which just hammers home why we need to rethink how we present things. And that brings us right to this idea of decoupling the standard from the sentence.
Yes, such a crucial distinction. What does grade-level content really mean? It should be about the core concepts, the skills, the thinking processes we want them to learn.
Not necessarily super complicated sentences or jargon.
Exactly. But somehow, over time, those two things got fused together. This idea that higher-level subjects just have to use more complex language.
It's often just tradition, isn't it? Not necessity.
The trigonometry example in the article makes this crystal clear. The original wording is something like, given a triangle with a hypotenuse of 10 units and a side of 8 units, determine the length of the remaining side using an appropriate theorem. Justify your answer.
Yeah, pretty dense. Even if you know Pythagoras' theorem, words like hypotenuse, determine, justify, appropriate theorem, they can be stumbling blocks.
But then look at the plain language version. This is a right triangle. One side is 8. The longest side is 10. What is the missing side length? Explain how you found your answer.
Oh, okay. Much clearer.
The math task, identical. The standard hasn't changed one bit, but the way in is totally different.
It really shows that the standard is the destination, like the goal we want students to reach.
And the language is just the delivery truck.
Right. And insisting on a really complicated truck in the name of rigor, that's confusing the vehicle with the destination.
And, as the article points out, a lot of curricula, a lot of platforms out there, they kind of bake this confusion in. They make things harder in both the content and the language used to present it.
So how do we fix this? Dr. Hoerricks argues strongly for plain language, framing it as pedagogical equity. But what does plain language actually mean here? It's not just simplifying, right?
No, definitely not dumbing down. Plain language, as the article defines it, is about being precise and accessible. It's about stripping away the unnecessary linguistic hurdles so the actual learning challenge can shine through.
How? Like, what does that involve?
Using shorter sentences, clear vocabulary words, people actually use active voice, consistent structure, basically clearing out the clutter without reducing the complexity of the idea itself.
That makes sense. And the article links this to depth of knowledge levels, the DOK levels. There's this myth that you can't do high-level thinking, like DOK 3 or 4, with simple language.
Right, a total myth. The article argues you absolutely can. And in fact, for many students, using plain language is the only way they can even get to those higher DOK levels.
Because they're not stuck just trying to figure out the question.
Exactly. If they can't decode the prompt, they can't engage in the deep reasoning required. Plain language also helps reduce cognitive load, right?
Explain that a bit more.
Okay, so cognitive load is basically how much mental effort something takes up in your working memory. Complex, convoluted language demands a lot of that effort just for decoding.
Ah, so simpler language frees up brain space.
Precisely. It frees up working memory, which is critical for students with SLDs, autistic students, multilingual learners. Anyone whose working memory might already be taxed. It lets them focus that mental energy on the actual task, the learning. It lines up perfectly with cognitive load theory.
And the article also talks about conceptual footholds, like using longest side before introducing hypotenuse.
Yeah, it's about building understanding step by step.
Mm-hmm.
You establish the concept with accessible words first. Then you introduce the more technical term once the idea is solid. It's a logical progression.
It all sounds very in line with Universal Design for Learning UDL principles.
Absolutely. UDL is all about creating flexible learning environments. Plain language is a key part of that. It's about fairness, clarity, respect, giving every student a real shot at learning.
Okay, but I can hear some potential pushback, an educator thinking, wait, if I simplify the language, isn't it not grade level anymore? The article tackles this concern head on.
It does, and it's a crucial clarification. The article is really firm. The grade level standard is in the concept, the thinking skill, not the sentence structure complexity.
So solving a tough algebra problem is still solving a tough algebra problem, whether the question is phrased simply or in complex academic ease.
Exactly. The core mathematical reasoning, the demand, it stays the same.
The Algebra 2 example in the article is good here, too. The original asks students to determine the x values for which the quadratic expression yields a non-negative output. Sounds very formal.
Very formal. And you can imagine a student spending precious time just parsing yields a non-negative output instead of, actually doing the math.
But the plain language version is just, when is fx equals x sub 5x plus 6 greater than or equal to 0? Show how you solved it.
See, the math task solving that quadratic inequality is identical. The thinking required is the same. The plain language just removes an unnecessary barrier to entry. It's like a ramp, as the article says. It makes the grade level content accessible without lowering the expectation.
And this connects to legal obligations too, right? Like IDA and Section 504.
Absolutely. Those laws mandate equitable access to the general curriculum. Equitable doesn't mean identical. It means providing necessary supports and adjustments, and that includes how information is presented so all students get a fair chance.
It's a powerful point the article makes. If we get too attached to complex phrasing, our content tests can accidentally become reading tests.
We end up testing their ability to navigate academic language, not their grasp of, say, science or history.
So ultimately, plain language lets us see what students actually understand and can do.
Rather than just how well they mimic academic jargon, it widens the door while keeping the intellectual challenge intact.
So translating this into the classroom, what does it look like? Whose job is it to actually do this?
Well, the official answer is usually, shared responsibility. Gen Ed teachers handle core instruction, support staff, add accommodations.
But the reality can be messy.
Yeah, the article points out it's often uneven. Dr. Hoerricks shares this really telling story from co-teaching Algebra 1.
Oh yeah, the word problems.
Right. Not one student with an IEP could independently tackle these paragraph-length word problems. But here's the kicker. A majority of the quote-unquote typical students also struggled massively.
Not with the math itself, but with the language.
Exactly, with the language. The rectangular garden problem is a perfect example.
Remind us of that one.
The original was something like a rectangular garden has an area of 30 square meters and a length that is 3 meters more than the width. Write and solve an equation. Kind of wordy, sets it up in a slightly roundabout way.
Oh.
Lots of students were just lost. But then they rephrased it simply on the whiteboard. This rectangle has an area of 30. The length is 3 more than the width. What are the length and width?
And the difference was?
Night and day. Suddenly, kids could picture it. They started asking questions. They could actually solve it. Their math ability hadn't magically changed.
Just the access point.
Just the access point. It really shows how powerful just like human-level interaction, talking it through, sketching it out, can be when you remove the language barrier.
So recognizing that mismatch between the delivery method and the student's ability to access it is key.
Absolutely. And simple things like a quick rewrite or a little sketch can be huge interventions.
Which implies we need a shift in professional development for teachers, right? Moving beyond just ticking compliance boxes.
Definitely. PD needs to help teachers really get the difference between the content standard and the format it's presented in, and then give them practical tools to redesign access.
Like dedicated time to practice.
Yes. Time to sit down with colleagues, with specialists, and actually practice rewriting questions, rewriting instructions in plain language.
And they need resources, presumably. Examples, templates.
Exactly. Concrete stuff they can use tomorrow. Sentence stems, visual scaffolds, clear examples, not just theory.
And the article stresses the importance of teacher voice in this, doesn't it? Pushing back against generic training packages.
Crucial. Teachers know their kids, they know their context. PD needs to be responsive to that, not just top-down mandates from vendors.
And this kind of PD, focused on clarity and access, it benefits everyone.
Totally. Not just students with IEPs. Think about students hovering near failing multilingual learners. Heck, it makes things clearer for the teachers, too.
So it really boils down to a shift in mindset, a commitment to seeing language as a tool for access and acting on that.
That's it. A shift in perspective, followed by a commitment to actually doing things differently. That's what lets more students get in the door, stay engaged, and think deeply.
Okay, let's circle back to that first image, the student staring at the test. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many times do we misread that struggle?
Yeah, how often do we see silence and think it's lack of interest? Or see a blank look and assume it's lack of ability, when maybe, just maybe, it's the way we ask the question.
Dr. Hoerricks puts it so well, thinking of plain language, not just as a writing trick, but as a pedagogical stance.
A core belief that every student can think complexly and that they have a right to learning we can actually access.
It's choosing not to let language be a gatekeeper.
It's saying, yeah, the clarity of the question matters just as much as the challenge of the answer.
So here's something for you, the listener, to chew on. What would really change if we started from a place of truly believing every student is capable? And consider that maybe, sometimes, the way we ask is the problem.
Yeah, what if every sentence in our classrooms, every instruction, every question became an invitation instead of a potential roadblock?
Yeah.
What possibilities open up then?
Because access, fundamentally, isn't just a nice to have, it's the bedrock.
It's the foundation. And every word we choose, every single sentence, is a chance to build that foundation, to build belonging and unlock understanding, one clear phrase at a time.